Welcome to 2.5 Squared, Part 3. And Part 3 is all about the all-important distributive property. And once again, we'll take our middle school students back to grade 3. The distributive property is a fundamental law of mathematics that involves both addition or subtraction and multiplication. It's generally written out like this in general: A times the sum of B and C is equal to A times B plus A times C. And it gets its name from the fact that this A is distributed as a multiplication to both the B and the C, and then that plus sign just stays between those two products, AB and AC. To give an example, a third grader should be able to do the following multiplication mentally. 8 times 27. Using the distributive property, we think of this as 8 times 20 plus 7. Multiply the 8 by the 20 and by the 7. It gets distributed. 8 times 20 is 160. 8 times 7 is 56. And that plus sign sort of stays there. And so that our ultimate product is the sum of 160 and 56, which is 216. And if we had used the standard multiplication algorithm, the distributive property would have been implicit or hidden within that algorithm. 27 times 8, we're taught to put down the 6 and carry the 5. 8 times 2 is 16, plus 5 is 21. There's the 216. But what's really going on there is we take a shortcut and we don't write as much. But what really is going on there is 8 times 7 is 56. And then this 2, of course, is not really 2. It's really 20. So we do 8 times 20 and get 160. Add those two partial products, and there's the 216 again. Now, in order to relate 2.5 times 2.5 to the distributive property, to use the distributive property, we have to employ what I like to call the mega distributive property. It actually ends up being the distributive property 3 times. Let's take an example from whole numbers. Broadcasting. See the red light? Silence on the set. Okay. That was one of my colleagues. This is my first day of broadcasting, so there are a few kinks. 2 whole numbers to multiply together. 23 times 47. Think of each of them as sums. 20 plus 3 times 40 plus 7. Now we're going to distribute that 40 plus 7 to each of the numbers in here. And it's just like before. The 20 has to be multiplied by the 40 plus 7. And then this plus sign will come down like that, just like in a simpler problem. And now the 40 plus 7 has to be multiplied by the 3. We've just used the distributive property once, and now we'll use it 2 more times. We'll do 20 times 40 to get 800, 20 times 7 to get 140, added to 3 times 40, which is 120, 3 times 7, which is 21. And when we add those 4 products together, let's see, this is 260, 21 makes 281. Added to the 800, we get 1,081. And if we did the standard algorithm, see if I'll have enough room over here to do it, 47 times 23, 1, carry the 2, 12 and 2 is 14. We put a 0 here because that's really 20. 14, carry the 1, 8 and 1 is 9. We add those and we get 1, 8, and a 10. 1 and 9 is 10. There's the 1081. And if you look in these partial products, the 141 we can see here with the 120 and the 21, and the 940 is right here with the 800 and the 140. So when you're multiplying two whole numbers, two-digit whole numbers together, this is always what's going on up here, and the standard algorithm is an abbreviation. So now we go to our overarching problem of 2.5 times 2.5. Let's think of it as the product of two sums. 2.5 is nothing more than 2 plus 1/2. And then we're going to multiply by another 2 plus 1/2. And one of the things about middle school math is familiarity with the symbolism. And I intentionally left out the time sign here. I teach my students from an early age, from grade 5, that when two things are right next to each other, in general, it's a multiplication. Parentheses right next to each other indicates a multiplication. And if an 8th grader happens to be watching this video, an Algebra 1 student, a high school student, that student will easily see that this is a binomial times a binomial, which is a big part of Algebra 1 when we get into dealing with quadratic functions. So once again here, we want to distribute this number to each of these two here. And we get 2 times 2 plus 1/2. And then this plus sign will come down like that. And now we multiply the same 2 plus 1/2 by the 1/2. And this formatting is exactly the way it was with the two whole numbers that we just did. So now we've applied the distributive property once. Now we have it 2 more times. We do 2 times 2 to get 4. 2 times 1/2 with the plus sign in between. 2 times 1/2 or half of 2 is 1. This plus sign comes down. And now again, 1/2 times 2, that hasn't changed. It's still 1. Plus 1, and then this plus sign comes down, and 1/2 times 1/2 is 1/4. And hopefully you've watched these 3 videos in a row, and you go back to the first one, and you'll notice that the 4 here, the 1, and the 1/4 are the 4 regions of that big square that we built in the first video. So we've come full circle. 2.5 times 2.5 is indeed still and always 6 1/4.